Good morning, all. We are starting a new topic this morning titled Functions of Microorganisms in Food. Microorganisms generally perform four major functions in foods, but these functions can be categorized into three, which are non-useful functions, useful functions, and inert functions. We shall be taking these functions one after the other. We are going to start with the non-useful functions. Under non-useful functions, we have two major categories: food spoilage and foodborne diseases. So looking at food spoilage, the spoilage microbiota consists of microorganisms that can grow on a food, causing undesirable changes. And the potential of microorganisms to spoil food rests on their ability to produce metabolites that are associated with spoilage. The growth of spoilage microorganisms in food may result in changes in their sensory properties, such as the color of food, the odor, the texture, and appearance. Now, spoiled foods may be safe to eat. That is, they may not cause illness because there are no pathogens or toxins present. But changes in the color, in the odor, in the taste, or appearance can cause them to be rejected. You won't just feel like eating the food. Example of such organisms that can cause this is Bacillus subtilis. Number two, looking at foodborne diseases. Microbial foodborne illness is often divided into broad categories. Now you have to listen attentively so that you will not get confused here. When you talk about foodborne diseases, they are divided into two: food intoxication and food infection. Food intoxication and food infection. What do we mean by food intoxication? Food intoxication occurs when the pathogenic microorganisms, that is, the microorganism that can secrete toxins, when the pathogenic microorganisms that is present in the food secretes a toxin in the food. Now, when you eat such food, it disrupts a particular target in the system, such as the gastrointestinal tract or the nervous system. The symptoms of intoxication vary from bouts of vomiting and diarrhea to severely disrupted muscle functions, as it is found with botulism caused by Clostridium botulinum. I hope we understand what I have just explained. Looking at the other type of foodborne disease, which is food infection. Food infection occurs when the microorganisms multiplies in food until it reaches the minimum infective dose, known as MID. The minimum infective dose is the number of microorganisms needed to cause illness in humans. When such foods are taken, the microorganisms act directly on the intestine. In some cases, the microbes infect the surface of the intestine. In other cases, they invade the intestine and other body structures. Most food infections result in some degree of diarrhea and abdominal distress. Food infection can result in toxin production. I don't want you to get confused here. I come again. Food infections can also result in toxin production, causing the same disease signs. However, in food infection, microbes growing in the infected tissue release the toxins. While in food intoxication, the toxins are already present in the food. We have just looked at the non-useful functions of microorganisms in foods. Those non-useful functions are broadly divided into two: food spoilage and foodborne diseases. Now, before we move to the second category, which is the useful functions, I want us to note something about microorganisms' functions in foods. A particular microorganism that performs a useful function in a particular food or substrate may perform deleterious functions in some other foods. I'm saying this so that we won't get confused at some point in the course of the lectures. So let us note it. For example, lactic acid bacteria. Let's take a look at the second function of microorganisms in food, which is the useful functions of microorganisms in food. Now, the useful functions of microorganisms in foods can be divided into two. We have in food processing and in food preservation. We are going to take them one after the other. Looking at food processing. Naturally, microorganisms carry out fermentation processes in many of our foods. And for thousands of years, mankind has used yeasts, molds, and bacteria to make food products such as bread, beer, wine, vinegar, yogurt, and cheese, whether consciously or unconsciously. Now, having taken a look at the useful function of microorganisms in food, the first aspect, which is food processing, we want to now look at food preservation functions of microorganisms in food, which is a useful function. The use of non-pathogenic microorganisms. What are non-pathogenic microorganisms? They are those microorganisms that don't cause diseases. Now, such microorganisms have been used to improve the microbiological safety or shelf life of foods, a process that can be referred to as biopreservation. Now, in a better way, biopreservation can be defined as the extension of shelf life and food safety by the use of natural or controlled microbiota and or their antimicrobial compounds. We'll quickly look at the third function of microorganisms before we bring this lecture to a close today. And the third major function of microorganism is the inert function. And what do we mean by the inert function of microorganism, which is the third category? We have the non-useful functions, we have the useful functions, and the inert functions when I started the lecture this morning. Now, the last part, which is the inert function. There are some microorganisms whose presence in the food are neither useful nor non-useful. They are just there. Either the substrate or the environment is too acidic for them or is too basic. And it could be that the temperature is not favorable for them. So such microorganisms are just in the food, just marking time. To say it in in a funny way. They are just there. They are neither useful nor harmful.